This shit feel like I won't ever make it home. Traffic's backed up, I got to get off of this road. Foot on the gas, I swear to God, I'm in my zone. Okay, foot on the gas, I can't stop, I got to pay tolls.
From St. Petersburg and Brooklyn, this is She's in Russia. I'm Lily. And I'm Smith. /Sergei. /Sergei. She's morphed. Yep. What is our episode? Well, our episode is a lovely conversation I had with the creator, thank you, the man behind, the creator of Sputnik1985, the brand. Yes. Also known as the merch. Not a brand. Yes. And you guys had the conversation in Russian? We had the conversation in Russian, and I painstakingly translated it and for a long time. And now it's ready for you in English. And Smith will be playing the voice of Dear Sergei. Mm-hmm. I will be playing myself. Yep. Here we go. Acting debut. And you'll be able to hear... What do you mean debut? This is the first time you've done this? No, it's not the first time, but you guys can all hear how I don't understand emphasis. We work on it every time. It's rough. We're going to repeat a lot. And Sergei's cute, skater boy voice will be underneath. Mm-hmm. Cute, smiling voice, more like. Yeah. В общем-то, я хотела сегодня поговорить о вашем бренде, конечно. So in general today, I wanted to talk about your brand, of course, and also more broadly about fashion. And in particular, street fashion in Russia or in the post-Soviet space.
Да.
Да. Но можно сначала... But first, can you just go ahead and introduce yourself however you're comfortable?
Привет, меня зовут Сергей, я занимаюсь брендом Sputnik.
My name is Sergei, and I make the brand Sputnik.
Так?
Like that? Да.
Класс. Спасибо.
Ну, что я ничего не перепутала. Yeah, just so I don't mess anything up. But it's all simple and compact. So, the first question I have... So let's not talk immediately about your brand. Let's start more broadly. Can you talk a bit about the development of streetwear in Russia as you see it? And not only in Russia, but in the post-Soviet space, or I don't know what to call it, the Russian-speaking space. The development in, say, the last 10 years, what's happening, what do we see, when did it start?
Что сейчас, что мы видим и когда это началось?
Ой, наверное, да, началось где-то 10 лет назад, более, когда люди...
Yeah, that started about 10 years ago, probably, possibly later. No one knew what to wear, what can be sewn, and I ended up in that world. I started making merch from the punk subculture. When you could make merch, print your band or something for your friends or for a zine. Merch has been around a while, and at some point people realized they can do it themselves, and not only merch, but some kind of clothing too, and do it as a brand. I don't know. I just don't know. I don't really like Russian. I'm not interested in Russian brands. Overall, they're just one or two maybe. The rest are all boring and uninteresting and derivative. Maybe we're also derivative somewhere in some ways, but it's fine. But the rest I really minimally like, in the sense that they're minimally interesting because you see what's happening. Everyone looks at what everyone else is doing and tries to do approximately the same thing. Right now, there are several brands that are doing things on their own, but generally there was a wave a couple of years ago when everyone realized that you can make money making your own brand, and they started making some t-shirts, sweatshirts, etc. But they are absolutely derivative, secondary. It was just some kind of business for people. People I know who have been doing this for a longer time, who started, 5-7 years ago, some of them continue to make something really fresh, new, and some of them are doing something derivative, something probably uninteresting to me.
А это именно уличные
And that's specifically street brands, correct?
Да, я в остальных не очень хорошо разбираюсь.
I don't really know much about others. Even these streetwear brands I don't know particularly well, since now there's millions of them. And I don't follow these millions because you really can't tell the difference between them at all.
То есть у них какое-то...
So they all have some kind of formula, like, for example, printing Russian text on a t-shirt.
Да, именно так, да. Они поняли, что на кириллице
Exactly,
можно
yeah.
написать все, что
They
угодно,
realized you
как,
can write anything you want in
как
Cyrillic. It's roughly
иероглифом написать
speaking like
что-то
hieroglyphs,
непонятное
something
для
that's not
всех остальных,
understandable for
да,
everyone
или,
else. People
ну,
not in
не
Russia, I
в
mean.
России, я имею
And
в
it's
виду.
interesting to
И
everyone. It's
интересно всем,
immediately
правда,
interesting.
интересно.
We
Над
started
читать
writing
в
in
том числе,
Russian.
да,
Our
потому что
prints
мы
in
просто
Russian started
английского не знаем
first and
ничего, и
foremost
для
because
того,
we
чтобы
simply
на
don't
английском
know
мы написали,
English.
просто
None
не
of us
знаем
know it.
этого языка.
We would happily
Для
also
нас это
print in
как бы
English.
не
We
позиция
just don't
такая,
know
что
that
мы вот
language.
обязательно только
For
кириллицей
us,
должны
it's not a
написать.
position or
Просто
something
надо
that we
выучить там
necessarily have to
10
only write
слов
in
английского
Cyrillic.
и
We
выучить
just
его.
we just need to learn to
Чтобы
write in
какие-то
English
свои
in
истории
school and
оттуда
learn the
какие-то
language. That's
отсылать.
it.
Там
I
вот
don't
есть
know.
бренд,
Probably several brands started doing more
я
complex
забыл,
things,
как он
not only
называется.
merch,
Они
but more
делали
complicated
коллаборацию
things.
с
Some brands
музеем
are referencing
космонавтики.
social
Они брали
phenomena or
историю
some kinds of subculture.
космонавтики и
Some are
делали
more aesthetic, they pay more
на эту
attention
историю,
to
делали
that.
какие-то
Some people are
вещи.
making
Ну,
up their
мне
own
кажется, это
stories,
интересный
some
проект.
are
Вот такие
referencing.
как бы
There's a
мне
brand, I forget what
интересно
it's called, but they did a
моменты
collaboration
вот
with the
этой
Museum
истории.
of Cosmonautics.
А
They took the
ну,
story of
просто они
space
живут, потому что
exploration and made
они
some things
работают
based on
с
that
тем,
story. To me, that's an interesting project.
тем, с чем ты
Those are the
пересекаешься, с
interesting
тем, что
moments to
тебе
me in this whole
интересно.
story. They're
Или
alive
то, о чем
because
ты
they
не
work
знаешь.
with what
Мне
you come into
неинтересно,
contact
например,
with.
бренды,
Something
которые
interesting to
пытаются
you or
сделать
something
там
you don't know about.
dark
I'm not
techno
interested,
эстетику,
for
которую они
example,
взяли
in
в
brands
Берлине
that
и
try to
хотят
do a
перенести
dark
сюда. Мне
techno
вообще это
aesthetic that
абсолютно
they got from
неинтересно. Я с этим
Berlin and
никак
want
не
to bring here.
пересекаюсь,
I'm absolutely not
никак с
interested
этим
in that.
взаимодействую.
I
Мне
don't
это,
come into
ну, это
contact
же
with
что-то
that. I
мертвое.
don't
И
interact with that at all.
взято из этой
It's
культуры
something
и
dead, something taken
попытка
from that
сделать это
culture
здесь.
and
Здесь
attempted to make it
существует
here.
свой dark techno,
Dark techno also exists
самобытный,
here in
наверное,
Russia
или
that's
наоборот, может быть,
distinctive, or maybe it's
что-то
the opposite,
вторичное. Но
also
можно к
derivative.
нему отсылаться или
But you can
думать,
also
ну,
reference that. You can
что
think
здесь
about
происходит,
that, what
как
is
здесь,
happening
как
here, how to
реагируется то,
react
что
to what is
происходит
happening
вокруг
around
тебя.
you. That's what I mean,
Наверное,
probably.
в этом плане.
I'm
Мне
interested
интересны,
in
наверное,
brands
такие
that
бренды,
work with those
которые
kinds of stories.
работают с
Well, and
такими
more
историями.
of those kinds of brands are appearing.
Ну и таких брендов, да, становится чуть больше.
Чуть больше. Но все-таки, типа, массовые, это... Они тоже не очень хорошие, потому что у них тоже...
But so these
Или
mass
в том
brands,
числе для
there's
вас
also a
это
problem of
такая
quality, or for
идея,
you it's
что
specifically
они
this
не
idea
не
that
смотрят
they
вокруг.
don't look at what's around them?
Ну, мне просто, да, наверное, у них качество
Yeah,
именно
probably. Well,
чего? Качество
quality of what
производимой ими
specifically?
продукции,
Quality of
именно как
production, as in the
там
quality of
качество
materials.
материалов.
We have a
Наверное,
situation
здесь,
here
да,
where you go to someone who has
такая
a
ситуация,
brand,
что у
even if
нас,
you know that person
ну, то
personally,
есть люди,
and ask
которые
them, where can I sew this product
подходят
I
к
want to
кому-то, кто
make?
делает
And the
бренд,
person will
спрашивают,
say,
где можно
I
шить,
can't
а если
tell
ты
you
знакомый
because
с
it's a
человеком,
kind
где
of
можно шить
trade
вот
secret.
этот
And you go to the
продукт, а он
factory,
тебе говорит, я тебе
you
не
order
скажу, потому
something,
что это
and you see
коммерческая
that
тайна.
that
А ты
person
приезжаешь
sews
на
there.
фабрику,
So there's some kind
заказываешь
of
что-то
rudeness
и
there.
видишь, что этот
There's a
человек шьет
moment
там. То есть какое-то
of
руководство
closedness.
присутствует.
People don't
И
share
как
contacts
бы
with each other.
присутствует момент
For example,
закрытости, что люди
I
друг с
started
другом не
working
делятся
on
контактами.
another level thanks to the
Я,
fact that other
например,
people
начал
did share some
заниматься
contacts with me.
на
I
другом
wouldn't
уровне
have
только
been able
благодаря
to
тому, что
figure it
люди
out on my
начали
own.
делиться со мной
There's
контактами.
some things here that
Самостоятельно
I
я
would
бы это не
have
узнал.
had
То
to
есть,
spend a lot of
например,
time to
какие-то вещи
find
я
out.
не
But
не
since
то,
people share some
что
contacts with
помогло мне
me,
дальше
gave me
как-то
some
перейти на
advice,
другой уровень
that helped me
развития
move forward, to
в
move
этом
on to
деле,
another stage of
быте.
development in this work.
А почему... Я не совсем поняла, почему вы
I
думаете
didn't quite
так,
get
почему люди об
why
этом
do you think people don't want to
не
share
хотят
that kind of
делиться?
information?
А я не думаю, так и есть. Просто когда ты подходишь...
I don't think that. It just is that way.
Не-не, почему так?
No, but I mean, why do you think it's that way?
Потому что они говорят, что...
Probably they're scared that you'll do something similar to what they're
Вот, тогда
doing,
как бы они хотят
and yeah,
какой-то
they want some
уникальности.
kind of uniqueness.
И
And
для
because of
себя
that, they don't
не
share contacts.
делятся
They won't
какими-то
give you any
контактами.
hints. But not
Что-то
everyone
не
is like that.
подсказывают.
Again, a
Но это
category
не
of
все
people
так,
does
опять-таки.
exist
И
who we
существует
communicate
другая
with,
категория
and they
людей, с
share
которыми мы
things, but
отлично
not
общаемся,
sharing
и
is the
они
overall
делятся.
trend.
Но в общем тенденция такая существует.
Я где-то читала, что у вас
I read
в
somewhere that you had or
старом
have a
заводе или
workshop in an old
бывшем советском,
factory.
да?
Да, я как раз сейчас, я сейчас как раз примерно
Yeah.
общаюсь из этого старого
I'm
завода,
actually
с
talking to
вами.
you approximately from
Да,
that
у нас
factory.
мастерская
Yes,
своя
we have our screen printing
по
workshop. We print
шелкографии.
everything
Вот, мы
ourselves.
сами все
Just
печатаем.
we like
Ну,
printing, and
просто
we
нам
started
нравится
with that
печатать.
specifically.
И
Everything
начинали именно
started because I just
с
couldn't
этого.
get a job as a
Начиналось
courier,
как
and I
раз с того,
thought that
что
I
я
needed to
просто
learn to do
и до
something.
сих пор печатаю.
And
Да,
I
у нас
thought,
своя
I'll learn
мастерская
to
в
do
этом
screen printing.
небольшая.
And I tried
Как
printing, and I'm
миллион
still
этих
printing.
мастерских существует.
Yeah, Yeah, we have our small workshop, like millions have their little workshops here, and we do our own printing. It's an old factory, electric factory.
Электрозавод.
Да, ну, то есть все
All your
принты,
prints?
то есть все...
Ну, 99%.
99%.
Принты, которые мы не
Sometimes there are prints that we don't have time to do by ourselves by the deadline, so we give them to our friend production, our friend workshop, and they print it for us. That happens, but 99% we print
печатаем
ourselves.
мы самостоятельно.
Это очень круто. Можно рассказать чуть-чуть еще про этот завод, про
Can you
историю?
talk a
Ну,
little
типа,
bit
что за
more about
завод?
the factory, about its history? What's the deal with this factory?
Это электрозавод. Здесь было раньше 3 завода на этом.
It's an electric factory. There used to be 3 factories in this factory, and now only one of them is left, and only partially. It made photography lamps and lighting, technical lamps for lighting. And since in the 90s, a lot of production was shut down, destroyed, the huge, gigantic territory of this factory was left. And a part of the building is considered now to have historical value, so it can't be demolished. And there's still 5 years to go before they start reconstruction here, when it will become some expensive real estate. Right now, it's rented out, and it's in the city center relative to where other production areas are located, and a big area. There are a lot of renters down here. Probably about 80% of this factory is people renting space for their workshops. Until a certain time, there were a lot of artists, musicians here, all these creative young people. Then the factory administrator started instituting some rules that were absolutely unreasonable, and the majority of the people moved out to another factory. It's 10 minutes away from here. It's called Nidar. It's the defense industry. It belongs to the Ministry of Defense, producing some kind of locators, some secret communication systems. But they also have a huge territory where there are spaces you can rent, and right now the majority of creative young people from here moved there, and we stayed here. And before that, we were in a workshop in a different building. It was the Moscow Experimental Knitting Factory, and we were in the workshop where the t-shirts for the 1980 Olympics were printed, and there was a woman who still worked there who printed those t-shirts for the 1980 Olympics, and her name, she was called Slava, like it was an abbreviation or something. She had this Soviet name, Slava.
Аббревиатура была или там, ну, в общем, советское имя Слава такое у нее было.
Аббревиатура или это её
Abbreviation,
настоящее
or
имя?
it was her real name?
Ну, да, это ее настоящее имя.
Well, yeah, it was her real name, but in Soviet times there were names that were abbreviations, so it was her real name.
Да.
She was a nice lady. At that point, she wasn't printing anymore, but we got along well.
Мне интересно, вот я много читала, что
I'm
вы сами
interested.
сказали
I
про
read about your
начало.
connection to
Почему
punk, and you just
или не
mentioned it.
почему, а что
Can you talk about
что
why
для вас
punk
это значит,
and what
потому
that
что
word means
для
to you?
многих слово
Because
punk
it's a word that
значит
can mean a lot
много
of different
чего
things for different
разного.
people.
We just, well, punk. The punk community, when I was more actively interacting with it, was a place where there was a minimum of assholes and you could have fun. I mean, do something interesting. You could do whatever you wanted, whatever was interesting to you. And it was cool and fun, and it was something like a DIY punk community. What we knew of what that was in the States, at least. When bands recorded their own music, organized their own concerts, tours, published their own things, released cassettes, printed t-shirts, overall an absolutely independent, or more like self-reliant, autonomous kind of society, community. We could do whatever, we didn't need any middleman.
Нам не нужны были какие-то посредники, поэтому было круто и весело.
That's why it was cool and fun.
Но это именно
Okay,
про
so
музыку,
that's
да?
particularly about music?
Нет, это социальная активность.
No, it's social activism, meaning here you weren't allowed to, well, in Russia there existed and probably exist several different understandings of what punk is. There are people who understand punk as a marginalized image of existence, just people who consume alcohol and have antisocial behavior. I was more interested in the subculture of punk that had the aspect of social activism that included anti-fascist initiatives, food not bombs, feminist initiatives, various ones. It was really a spectrum of social activity. Whoever was more into one aspect just did that. Just it was an alternative to the punk that suggested that you just drink and do nothing.
Тут можно было выпивать и делать что-то еще полезное. И для себя, и для других.
Это вы нашли это в
And you
Беларуси,
found
да,
that
или
community while still in Belarus?
Да, в 2000, наверное, в 2002
Yes,
или
exactly.
2000
In 2000, probably in 2002 or 2000. I got interested in that and I found some listing in a music newspaper. I was subscribed to a music newspaper and there were listings for dating, but there were also various other kinds of listings, and there I saw the word zine. I had no idea what the word zine meant. Sure, you all understand what zine means, but for me, I had no idea. I just wrote to a person, I put some money in an envelope, sent it, and waited for what would come to me in return, not knowing what a zine was at all. and I received a Xerox self-published magazine, and it was just so cool that I could also do it and that you could tell people about what's interesting to you. Tell it to yourself, make it beautiful, glue it all together and share it, spread it around, just like that, just like I got one. And there were a whole bunch of contacts. There were flyers with contacts, and I was just writing everyone. And I lived in a small town, a really small town, a population of like 12,000, and the post office and everyone was always surprised when I got a letter from Malaysia or from the Czech Republic or from somewhere else, because there that rarely happened. That kind of thing doesn't happen. So yeah, that's the moment when you can do everything yourself and with a kind of community, being in that community.
И каким-то сообществом, ну, то есть, находясь в каком-то сообществе.
Вы начали делать
Okay, so you started making your own zines.
Да, конечно, начал делать.
Yes, of course. I started making my own. I published zines, cut out and glued images, and yeah, we published them there in Belarus. Also with a friend, we published basically not everyone had a record player with records, and generally it wasn't that cheap to buy a record, and so we agreed with American bands to distribute their recordings that came out in the States. For example, Code 13 or Destroyed. We agreed that we would give them out on tape cassettes here in Belarus. Cassettes were accessible to everyone. I mean, the cost of a cassette was accessible to everyone. Everyone could listen to that music. So we distributed different foreign bands that way, and also local bands that played that we were friends with. But there were actually a lot of people who did that, published or distributed zines, recordings, did Food Not Bombs, tried to squat here, although that's really a failed idea here, to squat here, because it's a different situation, different conditions. You need it to be that you don't have anywhere to live, and you don't tell anyone about it when you squat. But squatting really isn't only a place to live, but there's some kind of social activity happening too. But that's not possible here, because then everyone would find out about it quickly and it would be shut down. That's why here it's not really possible, at least at the time.
А вы когда переехали в Москву, это было типа через
And then when you moved to Moscow, was it via that kind of community? Did you meet someone, or how did that happen?
Ну да, я
Yep. Well, I have a twin brother, and he moved to Moscow a bit before me. And then I moved, and we worked at a book warehouse and lived there. We worked as loaders at this book warehouse and lived there for some time. And yeah, we interacted with the community of punks. Punk or hardcore society, they'd probably be called then. Yeah, with that crowd, definitely. Because it was people with interests that are close to yours, and the people are close to you. From the beginning, you have some moments of intersection, of overlap. And yeah, so when I moved to Moscow, I was communicating with that community, and I continued to do some activism here in Moscow. It's been a long time.
Угу. Ну да, я хотела спросить, типа, вы сейчас в Москве давно?
Yeah, I wanted to ask. You've been in Moscow a while now, and you find it important or good or interesting to be in Moscow in particular, in Russia? And that's it, or what?
И все, да? Или какие у вас?
Не, мне кажется, что... Ну да, сейчас дело в том, что в какой-то момент я понял, что нахожусь здесь по инерции.
No, I think it's... The thing is, at a certain point, I realized that I'm absolutely here by inertia, that there's really no point in being here. At some point, I realized that I'm just existing here by inertia. I can leave, go somewhere else, and live in another place. I have absolutely no ties keeping me here. But yeah, I left for Sevastopol and lived there for just a little while. That's Crimea, near the sea. I tried to save money, but anyway, it didn't happen. And I decided I would go there anyway. And I lived with my friend, who was also from the punk hardcore community, for 3 months. We lived for 3 months in his apartment, and I don't know, somehow made some money. So we had enough for food, and while we rode in the sea and spent time near the sea, and we also rode around in the mountains. And then I just came back here and tried to find work and learned how to do screen printing. Yeah, it wasn't that long ago in principle. If I wasn't doing what I'm doing right now, I probably wouldn't live here. There isn't really a purpose, a reason for me living in Moscow, except for doing what I'm doing right now.
То есть вы сами занимаетесь?
So you yourself are doing the screen printing to this day?
Yeah.
Well, part of it I print myself, yes. But it's just that I need to be located here to organize. Well, not to organize, just to work here. I'm tied to this place. I can't work remotely, I need to be here. Yeah, not because I need to control everything, but just to do anything. I'm not here as a supervisor. I do actually do some work. Whatever needs to be done, I do it. If we need to unload something was brought, then I unload it. If we need to prepare stencils for screen printing, I'll prepare them. If we need to print, I also print. But there's a person now who prints constantly, and I print periodically.
Но все-таки компания или бренд или так.
So it seems like the company or brand or however you want to call it hasn't grown intensely. I mean, it's not like a whole lot of people work there.
Well, I think since the time when I did it all myself, and now there are 13 of us, I see that as growth. I started doing it alone, and then it became 13 people doing it. I think for a smallish brand or for a smallish group, that's pretty okay.
Да, нет, это...
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's okay. I just thought for a second it was just the two of you. I didn't realize it was 13 people. Yeah, that's a lot.
Ну, потому что вы сказали...
You said earlier that it's better to look around where you are, to look at what you understand, and to use that, well, to express yourself through that. And I was just wondering if you could give some examples of how that idea works.
Я понял, да, как такая идея реализовывается
I get it, how that idea is realized in clothing. I don't think it's better necessarily to, like, look at what you understand. Every person decides what is better for them. I just think it's more interesting, for me at least, it's more interesting, right? There are some kinds of cultural codes, and you understand them, and they work, and you can interact with them. I don't know. We also had some prints that were about some events that happened around us. We did some minimalistic prints where it was written, "We were born to make fairy tales come true." Right? That's the anthem of aviators. But when it's specifically in the context around you, it can be interpreted absolutely differently. Maybe I can be interpreted as patriotic with some kind of patriotic reference, or maybe it can be interpreted as a kind of absurd, "We were born to make fairy tales come true," something of the absurd or some kind of nightmare becomes true. I mean, you can interpret it in different ways. And in the beginning, we understood that these kinds of prints, they're probably cool because they can be interpreted differently. And they reference some reality that surrounds us. And I don't know, we did a print of Swan Lake, which they showed in 1991. Instead of showing what was happening in the country to avoid some kind of scary situation, all the TV channels showed Swan Lake. It's unclear why they decided to show Swan Lake when there were these important political moments in the country. They started showing Swan Lake. But I think in principle it's still relevant now. When some important event takes place, they can show you really anything as long as it's not what is actually happening. And you can interpret that absolutely in your own way. I mean, so yeah, probably some of our prints do work with the reality that is surrounding us. Well, not all of them probably. There are some that are just beautiful. Beautiful is also good.
Да. Thank you. You understood my question. Yes.
Я не понял, да? Не так я объяснил? Или что-то еще можно?
I didn't understand. Did I not answer it correctly?
Нет, вы поняли, все хорошо. Просто...
No, you got it. It's all good. I was just having trouble expressing myself. Yes, so these events, they're important specifically, well, both examples you gave, they're important not only in Russia, but more broadly in the former Soviet space. And I wanted to ask, in a previous interview, you talked about the term post-Soviet. And that right now it feels like a trend of some sort, and I don't know, maybe that makes it lose its meaning. Do you think the term post-Soviet helps to express some kind of concrete style or tendency?
Помогает продать это все просто людям, которые...
It helps to sell all that. helps people who use that term. That term, like the term underground and the term subculture, and right now the really popular topic of feminism, they just help to sell. So the only thing it stimulates is sales for those who use that term. People need some kind of tag that they can label something to attract attention. So you can say something is post-Soviet, and everyone will light up and come look at what it is, this post-Soviet thing. And everyone thinks it's something somehow, how do you say it, ugly, right? Some kind of style that's strange, raw, something crooked, something you don't understand, and everyone thinks, yes, yes, meaning there's a trend for that. And everyone's like, post-Soviet, and that's it. And immediately everyone starts checking their bank account balances, how much money they have. I mean, all these terms, they're already so often used with the goal of increasing sales that they at this point don't mean anything except the amount in your account. And that's it.
То есть вообще это ничего конкретного не описывает.
Yeah. So overall, it doesn't describe anything concrete because it's too empty.
Yeah, I mean, at some point it probably described something concrete, but then it became this trend, and just really anything could be called post-Soviet. And if you call it that, it gets more attention and it sells more, and that's it.
Я хочу спросить чуть-чуть еще про...
Okay, I want to ask a bit more about perception. So, in the West, or not only in the West, but just outside of Russia, or outside the or outside of the post-Soviet space. So the perception again of prints, lettering in Russian, or a style that we call streetwear, street style, you're talking about how people promote all of that, both in Russia and outside of it. But I want to talk a little more in detail about why you think Cyrillic in particular is that interesting to people who are not from that culture, who are outside of it, who do not understand why Swan Lake is printed there.
Да, потому что как раз поэтому, потому что они не понимают. То есть как бы вопрос того, что это что-то.
Yeah, exactly, because they don't understand. The question is about something unknown, something, although I don't know. No one understands what's written in Russian on those t-shirts. They're just like, whoa, Cyrillic. It's an aesthetic. I mean, visually, it probably looks beautiful because it's not understandable. And more generally, a trend exists that maybe some people understand it in the sense that it's post-Soviet, I mean, but probably the majority just know it's a trend because it's popular and people buy it. And it's popular probably because it's something wild, unknown. Well, as I see it, in their imagination, it's something strange, not understandable. And like, from Russia, yeah, cool, it's from Russia. Probably something like that. Just that it's something strange and unclear, it seems like.
Ну да, да.
Yeah. And how do you think the situation right now affects people's perceptions? I mean, the political situation, specifically in the West about Russia.
Политическая ситуация.
I don't know, honestly. You mean how it affects all that?
Ну, например, если...
Yeah, well, because it is sort of just a little contradictory seeming, at least on the surface, that, for example, there's a bad, negative situation between the countries, there's bad relations, and the mainstream media in both countries write pretty negatively about the other one. And so what does it mean that people, for example, in America think that clothes, for example, made by Gosha Rubchinsky are really cool and interesting in that situation?
Ну, одежда, например, в том числе Гоши Рубчинского, типа...
Но Гоша Рубчинский немного другая история, он больше фэшн.
Well, the story with Gosha Rubchinsky is a little bit different. He's more related to fashion. But I think for that example, I don't know. But it seems cool, I think. Right now, I think the contrast, it's actually interesting. For example, you have a neighbor who hangs the Confederate flag and you go out in a t-shirt with Russian writing and he already hates you and you're like, excellent, get yours and well, take that, feed on your hate. And that's it. But I don't know why people buy them. To be honest, I think there's no way to tell. I mean, these people who hung the Confederate flag, they're going to continue hanging the Confederate flag and listening to right-wing country and, I don't know, wear caps. But there are people who understand that, well, possibly they just don't care. Maybe they just don't care about politics. Maybe they understand that's all bullshit, and what's the difference? I don't even know. If I spoke specifically with certain people, maybe I could figure out, come to some conclusion. But in general, it's unclear. I think nobody really cares, to be honest. The internet erased all those borders, and people who try to convince us that those borders exist, they try to convince us, but for the majority of people, borders don't really exist because the internet exists. So certain borders are conditional.
Ну да, но просто мне кажется, что возможно...
Yeah, well, I just thought it seemed like possibly the politically negative situation actually helps to increase the general interest in Russia, actually. I mean, the negativity and all the stereotypes, or maybe not stereotypes, but just surface understandings, just that only the government is written about in mainstream media, not the people. And I just think possibly maybe that helps increase interest for people in the West towards, for example, something like fashion or art or something else that happens among people, not within the government. But I don't know. There definitely is, well, what you said about something wild, something not understandable, something else. But you could also say that about China, and we have a totally different relationship to that, to the Chinese letters, for example. It's absolutely different. So it's not only the fact that it's different, it seems like it's specifically that it's from that culture, Russian or Soviet. But I don't know why it's interesting to people. I don't know why it's interesting to me, so I'm just asking.
Ну да, может быть, еще же как бы вот этот тег постсоветский.
Yeah, maybe also that tag post-Soviet asserts a kind of empire, an immense empire that existed. And so it's interesting, probably. People are interested in what is happening in the remains of that empire here. Maybe that's what it is. I don't know. Maybe it wasn't worth asking me that question because I can only conjecture why it is interesting. These are just my proposals. It doesn't happen that I think that people in the States have the image of Russia, that there are bears walking around the streets here. No, of course. As I was saying, there are no borders. The internet exists. Everyone knows each other. Just, I don't know. It's like you get this part of some other culture in the form of a t-shirt, a part of another culture, and it's interesting. How it's interesting, how that culture works, what's happening there, how does it happen, and from that probably some kind of interest forms. Like you have some kind of, you're involved. Well, not involved, but you have some part of that culture in the form of a t-shirt or something else. I don't know. I'm just supposing.
Наверное, не знаю.
Ну да, так и... Да, я тоже предполагаю только.
I want to go back a bit to what you said about Gosha Rubchinsky, that he's more fashion. What do you mean by that?
Ну, я просто не... Ну, да, наверное, я не знаю.
I don't know. Gosha Rubchinsky. As I see it, at some point he became the... Well, it's as this term post-Soviet was brought to some kind of climax. Take from that culture absolutely everything that is requested by consumers. Take it and bring it to its maximum and present it. For example, you have these stretched long sweaters that people wore because you were always bought clothes to grow into. You didn't buy clothes for yourself every season. For example, in the 90s or in the Soviet Union, people didn't have as many opportunities to buy. You bought something to grow into, so you wore a sweater that you're going to still be wearing in a year or two. So you bought it long, and that's why you looked a little strange, right? A little bag-like in a hung sweater. So all those attributes, all those visual aspects were taken by Gosha and brought to their extremes, to the max, and presented in the form of that brand, probably. Well, there was a huge demand for that, and so why not? He did it.
Ну, окей, ну, что это значит, что он больше fashion?
Okay, but what does that mean that he's more fashion? You consider yourselves not?
Но он художник, да, он
Well, he's an artist. Yes, well, we're not like a brand. We're like people who print merch, and he's like an artist. He's a more creative person. I can call him an artist, right? An artiste. And I'm not. We're not. We're more craftspeople. So, like, he's an artist, and we have nothing in common with artists. We're not creative people.
Whoa, это... Не знаю, мне это удивительно, что...
Whoa, I don't know. That's really surprising that you say that. I'm also interested to know, Gosha Rubchinsky is probably, well, at least in high fashion in America, he's probably the most well-known figure from Russia. his name is known. I mean, not among normal people, but in high fashion. And all these famous people wear his clothes, etc. And I'm always curious to know what other designers who maybe also make streetwear in Russia think about him. Do you think he's doing it right, or it seems like you have a pretty positive relationship towards him?
У вас положительное отношение.
Да, конечно. Просто я понимаю его как...
Yeah, of course. Just I understand him. I think of him as an artist, and that's not my field to judge in that environment. He's an artist, a designer, a creative person. And in that environment, in that sphere, I can't judge because I'm not that person. I'm not related to that world. I can't judge that world. I have no negative feelings towards him. I mean, to his brand, absolutely not. I mean, he's just an artist. He sees it that way probably and makes it that way, but I don't. We just do merch and he does fashion.
А он моду.
Я просто... Ну, да. Я думаю, многие бы сказали, что
Yeah, I think a lot of people would say that you also do fashion. But that's it's really interesting. Okay, merch.
Okay.
Да, чтобы ты мог...
Well, so yeah, you can. Damn, I subscribe to a bunch of those companies in the States who do screen printing to learn something. You can ask them, they sometimes answer, help with some technical issues, and a few of those companies have their own merch just for their printing studio. They're 5 grown ladies and 5 grown men, and they have their own merch. Yeah, damn, it's really cool. It's not even like a business that brings in a lot of cash, just a thing they do that they like, that they enjoy doing, and they have some cool merch, and I always like their merch. I find it pleasant. And I write to them, oh, your merch is so cool, or order it even, and it's always, well, we do that too, something of our own, and it would be cool if people found it pleasant that we're doing something interesting, something interesting somewhere, and you can order it like merch. So just like a fan paraphernalia of some sort. It's just nice, at least to me.
То есть менее важно.
Okay, so it's less important that it's a t-shirt or a sweatshirt, or it's more important that... Well, what differentiates merch from something else?
Мерч это вот
Well, you feel kind of involvement with some group of people, right? So you like some group or band, for example. For example, I like this screen printing studio in Arizona, right? I don't remember what they're called, but they do everything really cool. Not even in terms of quality. The quality is also good, but just some kind of human element that's really important there. You feel that they're just these good grown-up aunties. I don't know. Of course, maybe in their free time, I don't know, maybe they have some kind of strange political views or something, but it seems like not. And just overall, it's just this good group of people making some interesting things. In terms of design, and you think, oh, cool, I like that. And the people themselves, the most important thing is that there are decent people behind it all. You feel that there are good people behind the thing, and you think, I'll definitely buy it, for sure. I'll write to them, and if I can, I'll buy their merch.
что где-то там далеко есть люди, и ты их мерч носишь.
Like, why not? It's just nice that somewhere far away are these people and you're wearing their merch.
So everything that you do is merch from your brand?
Да, мерч.
Yeah. We try to make merch so that something is left, some moment. Not like a brand, but just merch. We print. We also print merch for various groups. We also do that for them.
That's like when you do some kind of collaboration.
Да, совместно.
Yeah. Collaboratively, for example, some band is going on tour, someone we know or someone we don't know, but an interesting group, and we agree with them to print them a set of t-shirts for their tour. Like someone said, I remember there was some kind of news, I don't remember about whom, but that someone was printing on Gildan t-shirts. And everyone started talking about it, and it was some big person who was printing on Gildans in the States. I don't remember, and everyone was pissed. Why did he print on Gildan? Jeez, that was very revealing, actually. That it's not important what you print on. What's important is the story behind it, the person behind it. If you're good, you're interesting then. If you're a decent person, then it doesn't matter what you print on. You can print on a gold t-shirt. Really would not make sense, but yeah, it's indicative. It's telling. It's specifically related to merch. That the most important thing is what's behind it, that there's some kind of story behind it.
Я понимаю, что времени мало, и тоже Я просто еще не завтракала.
But can I ask you one last question?
Да, конечно. Я еще, да, тут нахожусь.
Yes, of course. I'm still here.
Мы много о чем уже говорили.
We already talked about a lot of things that I wanted to ask you about. It just sort of happened naturally, so I didn't even have to ask, and you just told me yourself. But here's a question. Also, I read in another interview. It was an interview with. It was an interview with Sportswear International. You said that. Well, as I understand it, you said that your brand recently became less political because or as the country has become more divided.
Да.
Well, in part, yes, because in general, it has become that people quickly, right away, put labels on you and understand how to handle you based on that label. So, roughly speaking, you say you're in favor of the authorities and you get some label. You say you're against and you get another label. But here, in our prints, there should be some kind of subtle irony. In the prints that are on political topics, there should be a subtle kind of, you can very subtly, gently joke. So then it will work. Otherwise, it will work like propaganda, or from the other side, just being against the authorities, roughly speaking, right? But we don't make propaganda, right? So here you have to make jokes very subtly. Not because there's fear, but because we're not a mouthpiece for propaganda. Not in any direction. Not in one or the other, and we never will be, so you need to make fun of them. All of them. They're also very serious snobs, and they don't understand humor at all. So you make fun of everyone, meaning there should be some kind of irony. Because everyone's so serious, even amongst a lot of brands that really seriously relate to the fact that they are making some kind of culture or something else, and well, I don't know. Overall, I'm against that.
В общем, я против. Я за юмор и за иронию, и за...
I'm for humor and irony.
Мне нравится это. Ну, а как это получается, что тогда так дверь открывается?
Вам завтрак привезли?
Нет, было бы хорошо. Did you bring me breakfast? Ну, так, про юмор.
Okay, about humor, yeah, I understand what you're saying. I'm just wondering, has anything changed in your approach then, or you always tried to do that, to not create propaganda, but just to joke instead?
Да, конечно, да. Просто сейчас...
Yes, of course, yes. Just now you need to do that even more subtly. You need to search for some kinds of things that might be... Well, for example, how we had the We Were Born to Make Fairy Tales Come True print. We also had Through Thunderstorms Shone on Us, the Sun of Freedom. So also some kinds of prints that are ambiguous. You can read them patriotically, or on the other hand, you can understand them. Well, if you look at the situation, then you can understand that these prints are funny, that they're about the absurd happening around you, about some horror and absurd in the situation happening. So you can interpret it in absolutely different ways. And probably you need to do it in that same vein. It's not that we're saying that's it. We don't have any position in relation to what's happening. No, of course we have a position in relation to what's happening. Just you need to gently mock what's happening, somehow more qualitatively notice the situation.
А как, ну я просто хочу, ну из последних.
I just wanted to ask, from your more recent inscriptions, can you talk about one in particular, or was the sun one also from your recents?
Да, сейчас я даже не... Сейчас могу под...
Oh, from our most recent was that one, the Russian Ark collection. That was our second to last collection that we had. We still have it now. That was Russian Ark.
The song by Monetechka?
Песня? Ну, песня тогда...
The song Russian Ark didn't exist at the time. There's this work by Pimen Karpov, a Russian writer at the beginning of the 20s. And he had this book, this work that's called Russian Ark. And we were referencing that mostly. On these prints, all of them were embroidery, prints, silicone tags of the geodata of Solovki, the Solovetsky camp was, where they sent people to the gulags, that system of northern camps. Well, that was a reference to those camps, to that political topic. So yeah, we printed geodata and the Russian arc on these t-shirts, like an image of a wagon, a Russian arc, because people were transported in these wagons. A lot of educated, I don't know, scientists, a whole bunch of people who could have made all this, and regular people also. Just a huge part of the population was taken there, not only to Solovki, but in general to those camps. And then someone wrote me that Monetichka released a track called Russian Art. But since she studies there at the Gerasimov Institute of Cinematography, or where does she study? She was making a reference to a film by Sakurov, Russian Art. And we, on the other hand, were referencing Pimen Karpov. Before that, I hadn't even watched Russian Art. I watched it a week ago. After I watched an interview with him, I watched the film Russian Art. Before that, I hadn't seen it. And actually, before I was told about the reference to Sakurov, I didn't know he had a film called that. It was just a work by Pimen Karpov, but I don't think we argue who made it first, Monetichka or us, but that's totally not important to me. Sometimes there are things that are just on the surface and they are realized in several variations. So maybe that's one of those, or maybe not, but the frequency isn't important. I mean, who did it first in this case is absolutely not important for me. We can ask Monetichka.
Ну, да.
When I interview her.
I'll send a message. Maybe she'll answer us in a direct message. We'll ask, like, tell us, is it important who made Russian Arc first? And I'll send you the result if she answers, but I hope she answers.
Спасибо. Это, блин,
Damn, that was really great. Thank you. It was just really interesting to speak with you.
Спасибо, да, взаимно.
Thank you. For me too.
Turning left, go right. I know road go right. I'm on go tonight. Go, go.
That's the episode. Thanks for listening. As always, be sure to support us on patreon.com/She's in Russia. Follow us on different forms of social media at She's in Russia. Subscribe to our monthly image-based newsletter at she'sinrussia.com. And we'll have a bunch of links in the episode description for Sputnik1985 and this interview reference, yeah. And I guess that is all.
Thanks, Sergei.
Good night.
Traffic's backed up, back up, you get off of this road.
Like they named kids like Len Stahl, you know, like two.
So dumb.
They used to find people named that. Not a good example. There are real examples. I can't remember.
Oh, that's not a real example.
It's very similar.
You could name them Stalin.
Stalin, yeah, no.